Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the minigame podcast. Today is Friday, July 11th, starting a little bit later than I said I was going to start as far as scheduling things. Having a bit of an off day. There was something I wanted to do, but it required me to actually go to sleep last night, and that didn't happen, so I missed out on that. And then otherwise I've just been in a less productive mood than what I really would have wanted to do. We'll do about an hour of warm-up and then we'll jump into video game news. Today is Friday, July 11th, if I haven't said. Yu-Gi-Oh's still doing pack openings for its 10 billionth card downloading, so we'll show that off. We might as well. But yeah, there's so much dust in my garage, which is probably because the dryer lint is not going out as much as it should, that I believe it has just dirtied / broken the volatile organic compound sensor, or VOC sensor as they call it, on my smart water heater, which for most people, if you didn't have a smart water heater, would probably just mean that it would straight up shut off the water heater and start blinking a light at you, some kind of light code. Since I had a smart water heater, it told me very specifically what it was. I went and looked at it, and it had come falling out of its place in which it was supposed to be. And yeah, since it is testing for combustive gases, natural gas in this case, there is room for a lot of concern there, and immediately calling a plumber, which would immediately cause me to pay a lot more money. But there's a thing here. My garage also has a natural gas alarm in it. So if the natural gas was really leaking, I would probably smell it, since they put a smelling agent in there, and B, the natural gas alarm would go off. But just to be double certain, I put in my HEPA filter, which also has a VOC sensor in my garage, just to see what the levels were like, and the levels are low. So yeah, the VOC sensor that is connected to the water heater is really just a resistor type device. So there's a forward voltage put on front of it, and it tests for resistance, and if something gets in the way, like an organic gas, then the resistance goes up. But if it gets dirty with dust, really dirty with dust, or just fails for some other reason, which I guess is also a possibility, then it will also fail. So I would say I'm 97% sure that was the issue, but it took me a while to just double check and test, because yes, I obviously don't want to blow up my house. So yeah, I'm ordered a new one for a whopping $30, which is still probably about $20 more expensive than it should be. And since it is just 2 wires that I don't even think have polarity to them, I will just replace it. Now, if I replace it with a brand new one, and that one starts giving me trouble too, then I will have to call a plumber and shut off the gas in the meantime, which would mean no hot water, which would be a little bit of a problem. And then on top of that, my dishwasher, which wouldn't be 100% opposed to replacing, but there really aren't any great replacements. I did see that there was an announcement of a spinning dish rack, so they're advertising it for like people in wheelchairs, where you don't have to stretch and reach as far to get to the back and load dishes that way. That's an intriguing thing. The problem with my dishwasher more than likely is because it's not level. And so my first move here was to just try and level it. But it could also be that there is mineral deposit build up on the intake hose. The error messages are not particularly great as far as how it all goes. It might also be just a case that I am asking too much of the dishwasher and need to do the dishes or before doing the dishes, which you basically always have to do that anyways. You know, you just can't have something caked on with like cake batter or food particles of any sort and then throw it in the dishwasher and turn on. Even if it has a power scrub mode, he's still probably not going to be able to handle that. But yeah, so potentially I'm sitting on the risk of 2 surprise extra expenditures. I am making a little bit more progress as far as decluttering, but I'm also getting to a point where I'm realizing I'm gonna need to start reaching out for some people to help me as far as just getting any of this done before Christmas. And then the reason I was late, just to wrap up today's woes, as far as I was playing Command & Conquer Red Alert, and I did what I thought was going to be possibly the last level, and then it immediately jumped into a unique inside the building level that plays completely different than any of the other levels. And so that very well may be the last level, but it's really difficult even on casual difficulty, and I thought it was going to be a quick 5-minute victory lap, and instead it turned into an extra 50 minutes of gameplay. So I went over by 50 minutes trying to record 1 hour. There's also the Prime sale, which the Prime sale gets me every year as far as you get in there early and you get the practical things and you go, all right, this is it, this is all I'm going to buy. And then it just starts to eat away at you. It just starts to tease those neurons in your brain to say, well, maybe you should get this too. Maybe you should get that too. So I have been back. There's 5 more hours on the Prime sale, and usually the last 24 hours are useless. Like the lightning sales and stuff are usually useless, but yeah. Over the period, on top of a new VOC sensor, I got a soap bottle attachment for a soap dispenser that goes into a sink. You know, those kind of hand pumps that are on kitchen sinks. Well, there's an attachment there that would let you put a bottle under the sink and just have it always full instead of refilling bottles. Bathroom glass jars, a bathroom toothbrush or razor holder that has a UV light cleaner on it, and you wave your hand in front of it. It's a gadget, certainly. So you wave your hand in front of it, and then it reveals the toothbrush or razor that is UV cleaned and dried. I also decided to get the Samsung 1TB Sonic branded micro SD card, since it was a decent deal. And then I bought some outlets, since there's a decent chance that one of the outlets I have is shorted out. And then I bought Ghost in the Shell 4K UHD. So I'm still not really buying too many like ridiculous gadget things. And then dishwasher cleaner in bulk. I'll have probably a lifetime supply of that. So yeah, still mostly practical things though. Like, with the exception of Ghost in the Shell 4K UHD and maybe the gadget of the toothbrush UV cleaner, which I question, even for immunocompromised people, whether you need to be that concerned about UV cleaning a toothbrush, and I question whether UV cleaning a toothbrush is just going to make the bristles become brittle and fade. But yeah. Yeah, I didn't go really crazy there. Noticeably, I wouldn't have bought any video games from Amazon, and there aren't any other Prime Day sales. And weirdly, the other big thing, like, I need like a bench outside, and I need some taller bar stools. So even the other big things that I might have bought, which really weren't on sale, and are practical things, which is probably just me patting myself on the back for nothing, in that I still ended up buying things in a time where buying things is probably a bad idea, but who knows. Yeah. Moving on, we'll look at the most wishlisted upcoming Steam games. There's a whole thing about Subnautica 2 that has come about where it seems like the publisher Krafton intentionally delayed Subnautica 2, at least this is the accusation, so that the developer, Unknown Worlds Entertainment, would not have a chance of getting a bonus to the tune of $250 million. A lot of that was going to be paid out to the entire staff, the claim is, but I bet a lot of it was also going to be paid to specific people in charge of Unknown World Entertainment, who have since been fired and I think since filed a lawsuit. Now it's crazy to write a contract in this way to say, hey, if you I believe Krafton acquired Unknown Worlds. It's crazy for them to have a contract to say, hey, we're going to give you a performance bonus if you make a certain number of sales in general, instead of saying specifically if you make a certain number of sales per game, which is how I've always heard any other publishing agreement with a bonus work. But I mean, I don't know if it's insulting to say flimflammery, if that's a term you can still use or not. I think shyster is no longer considered acceptable, but this kind of contractual flimflammery is just at the core the problem of what managers do and accountants do, and just capitalism in general does, is it tries to create what is inherently a simple system designed to screw over the smaller people as much as possible, and even allow the richest of people screw over the middle class of people, and they just hide it amongst a lot of confusing schemes, so it doesn't seem as obvious that that's what they're doing. Yeah, I definitely have thought that there is room for contracts to be written by third parties in simplistic terms, and that there should be a government agency that would just say, here is a standard contract for this standard type of business transaction, and parties should use the standard contract. If they try to add something that it derivates from a standard contract and then there's a lawsuit, judges are going to be at their discretion to say, I'm nullivating your contract and I am applying this standard contract. And with this standard contract, there is going to be a standard law precedent, and it is going to be applied much more fairly and evenly. I heard a very unusual source talk about this game Half Sword. So apparently it is a big deal at the moment. But yeah, the whole Craft and Subnautica thing just once again shows how there's way too much big business in video games and not enough artistic desire to just make a game. Now, the accusations are being taken as true by many, many people, and I think perhaps too many people, because I feel like there might very well be a rebuttal that happens here. I did close all the duplicate tabs, so this is running slow. Give it a second to catch up. Where it may very well be the case that Unknown Worlds management that just got laid off is just making these claims to stir up support for a lawsuit for being fired, or that they were actively trying to rush out Subnautica 2 in a bad state, and Crafton actually is right in their claim that they got feedback from playtesters that said the game needed more time and more polish. In most other cases, games being delayed should always be thought of as, well, not always, but in most other cases, should be thought of as a good thing for gamers, because it means they aren't rushing out a garbage experience. And the story, I think, gets even crazier in that I believe the person in charge now of Unknown Worlds, who replaced the people who were fired somehow by the publisher, because the publisher owns the developer, which I still very much believe publishers should just disappear completely. But the guy in charge now, I believe, is the guy who was in charge of making the spiritual successor, quote unquote, of Dead Space, which was, what was that called? The Callisto Protocol? And the Callisto Protocol also, as an experience, felt rushed and not polished, and so it's kind of hard to know who to believe, and really you shouldn't believe either one of them. The truth is probably in the middle quite a bit there. But it is the internet, and the internet is drama. Speaking of drama, I'm still seeing more and more posts interpreting what YouTube said as far as their new stance on no automated, no AI content in the YouTube Partner Program. And so on that thought, I wonder how much the 7-day game matters for wishlisted games. I'm thinking what I'm going to try and investigate, and I'm not even sure you can do this, is just manually not monetizing the YouTube Shorts. Maybe that would make a difference there. Maybe it really wouldn't. But if you were to just say, hey, the YouTube Shorts I make are going to use text-to-speech, so effectively what people would call AI voices, that there is an argument there to just go ahead and say don't monetize that. But I don't know if that is going to help you one bit as far as being evaluated for the YouTube Partner Program, particularly if there's just a lot of subscriptions and a lot of views being funneled from a non-monetizable or non-monetized footage to monetized footage. The thing here is that the YouTube Partner Program has just never really worked this way, and it probably should have worked more like this from the beginning, but we are like 15 years plus into YouTube existing, and so it's any change is crazy. So yeah, apparently there's a lot of enthusiasm around this game. A ragdoll physics game where you are attacking others with a lot of gore and violence, and I think if you hit somebody in the head, their controls get worse, is I think some of the idea too. But yeah, I don't really see anything here particularly great. This feels like something that you could and would want to polish into more of a video game experience and then put into a much larger game. If you told me the next Elder Scrolls game had physics-based medieval combat, that might be very interesting, but it would just be a small aspect on what you would expect from the next Elder Scrolls game. Alone, this just feels like another co-op game, another game in that style of physics. And we'll scroll down the last 3 days as far as this day in video games on Moby Games. Yeah, I'm not even sure you can say don't monetize shorts. I don't think shorts even are monetized in that way. The only other thought, though, for me to do would be to make a whole new channel. Just a completely separate channel, putting YouTube Shorts on it, and then that would be a lot of work, where then the cross-promotion would be crazy. I wonder if that is what we're going to start seeing other people doing, too, is that they're going to all of a sudden start making clips channels again, or shorts channels in particular, that is just full of a lot more automated stuff, depending on how much of a crackdown there really is, which is a big if. It's not personal, I know this, but it's hard to not feel like it is sometimes personal. It's just the human brain to make connections where there are none, but it does certainly feel personal that a level of success has been achieved on my channel by figuring out how to make these automated shorts, and just as I'm anywhere closer, well, I'm closer now than I ever have been before to entering the YouTube Partner Program again, since they last changed the rules and pulled the rug out from under people. They're changing the rules again, and I've been saying that for years now too, is that there's a decent chance that by the time I did get enough watch time and subscribers to be considered for the YouTube Partner Program, they would change the rules again. And yeah, there's now even more chance that they would just evaluate my channel and say, no, it's not good enough. Yeah. And there is a danger, I think, for gamers in particular, that's going to be the case, is that you're just going to see more and more gamers kicked out of the YouTube Partner Program for not being artistically creative enough. There is also a question about VTubers that deserves an answer, as far as if you have a full-on VTuber character who doesn't want to show their face for one reason or other, and who doesn't want to use their voice for one reason or other, then are they going to be kicked out of the partner program? Because there are some pretty popular and pretty big VTubers out there that could cause quite a pushback if that happens. And I'm sure there's a decent number of content creators out there that have some kind of filter on their camera, making them look more pretty than they really do. What's really crazy about this is they just went and announced something almost 100% contradictory to this new announcement. And it really goes to show how there's just no uniformity and no leadership in YouTube, because they just announced the ability of people to make scripted animation things that can be used by other people making YouTube shorts more in an Instagram way. Their example was how to change the face of a character of the person using it to green and giving them alien antennae, which, yeah, I don't see how you can't call that a automated AI type modification also. It would almost make sense if the two things were directly competing with each other, but I don't think they really are. I can't help but wonder if this change isn't just really YouTube realizing that they're not going to A, be rid of TikTok by it being banned, or B, buy TikTok. It feels like there's more of a gap on one side than the other. Maybe I'm just leaning. Might just be leaning today. Same old with the mobile games. It's getting, frankly, repetitive to say it. So we can quickly scroll down this chart and then move on. Yeah. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. And same is kind of true with the Steam hardware survey stuff. Leave it at that. And then my chart is still a mess, and seems like it may be even getting worse. Still playing Command & Conquer Remastered. 17 out of 33 achievements. But still know that there are some achievements that I won't get. I'm not playing anything else. What's kind of sucks here is I've come to realize that Red Alert 1 is not the Red Alert with Tim Curry in it. So, either I continue playing Red Alert as a series, after playing both what they call Tiberian Dawn, the first Command & Conquer game, and Red Alert Remastered. I then would have to play the original Red Alert 2, which is not remastered, which probably still would look perfectly fine, just to get to the content and story I really would be interested in showing off. And I just don't think I want to do that. Like, it's too much Red Alert, and Red Alert also still completely failed, like I said on Wednesday's stream, to do what it was supposed to do, which was to keep me so enthralled with it that I was not checking the Prime sales every few hours. And yeah, I was still doing that every 5 hours or so. I definitely would have bought a lot more had I needed a lot more, or had the sales actually been good. So yeah, it definitely is a case where it's time to move on once I'm done with Red Alert, which I'm not anywhere close to being done with Red Alert. Let's see what Shadowverse's reviews are at this point. Steam sale is over, and unlike the Prime Day sale, I was able to just have a list there, sit on the list for a whole week without really being concerned, because they don't do any kind of lightning sales or anything to really push people to buy now and consider whether it was a good idea later. Valve doing a good guy sale, where Amazon.com is definitely doing the scumbag type of sale. but they are definitely pushing you to overspend. Yep, there's nothing that I really feel like I should have gone back and gotten during the sale. I've got plenty of games, and I know it. I have less time than games, and I know it. And so now that the sale is over, the odds of anything new coming out anytime soon, or anything being really necessary to buy, are kind of low. Unless you are, like most people, a player that plays whatever the new hotness is, which at this point it seems like peak might be the new hotness. Jurassic World Evolution 2 is potentially on sale because of the latest Jurassic Park movie. And it is also worth pointing out that they announced Marvel Rivals Season 3, which literally the day before I was thinking I hadn't heard anything about Marvel Rivals. Yeah, 2021 game on sale for $3. Not terrible, but then once you get to the deluxe edition and the premium edition, if you actually need the premium edition, then you're back up to expensive territory. Yeah. There's just like a lot of fads, I would say, around things kids were interested in when I was a kid, and Jurassic Park is one of those examples. And I think they're just desperately trying to remonetize Jurassic Park as a concept. Whereas I don't know if kids these days care about Jurassic Park. In fact, it's probably a better thing that kids really just don't care about anything that their parents were in love with. And even when you have things like the Ghostbusters, kids these days are probably thinking of a very different Ghostbusters than Ghostbusters 1, which is what their parents would probably be thinking of. They're probably thinking of the characters from Frozen Empire. We just clicked on this, Marvel Rivals. So recently it's at 65% positivity. Overall it's at 76, or is that 78% positivity? Yeah. And I'm gonna flag nudity just because I am almost 100% certain there is no nudity in this game. Yeah. I seriously doubt it. They might jokingly be trying to imply that people like Venom are technically nude, or that the Hulk is technically nude. It would be weird, certainly, if this MOBA game at some point did have some way of having a character nude. Yep. I guess the player base is still pretty high, though. 162,000 peak off of 644,000 all-time peak on Steam is not bad for something that came out in December of last year. Although not particularly great either for some, when you think about it. But in contrast, if they are just now announcing Season 3 for Marvel Rivals, which they may actually be in Season 3 at this point, that is showing a confidence and a slowness to how their seasons go. Whereas Magical Modica Magi, etc., which I'm playing on my phone, is up to Season 8, and it definitely came out after Marvel Rivals did. It is just rushing through seasons, potentially faster than even one a month, to probably push out as much content as they had already made and planned to make over the course of several years, to then, I assume, abandon it as soon as they stop making enough money on it. Shadowverse is mostly negative at 32%, so the fandom around that is very much still negative. And in this case, sexual content probably is somewhat accurate of the description, just because of the skin-tight lewd outfits that some of the characters wear. Well, the Steam Deck refurbs are out of stock again. Well, we can reload the page and see if it refreshes that, but it is intriguing. Something has changed here. Don't we see that? The Steam Deck's originals for the 64GB LCD, 256 LCD, and 512 LCD are all missing prices completely, which implies to me that Valve may be done selling refurbs. They probably, I would think, would ship off any other refurbs to GameStop and just let GameStop sell those refurbs, or sell them on eBay instead of selling them directly on their website in much smaller numbers. Which, yeah, I can see them not selling refurbs because they want to drop support for refurbs and they want to go forward with the OLED version and make room for potentially a new version. What would confirm that, based on speculation, just because the prices are missing, would be if they're not selling the LCD version at all. So let me undo that close and scroll down here to the link to buy it brand new. Let's see. Where is that link? There it is. So yeah, seems like they still are selling the 256 LCD new, but it almost feels like they probably would like to drop that completely, but then that would mean that it goes from being $399, which feels like $300 when really it's $400, compared to another $150 for the $550 price. But yeah, we are very much in just a different type of world now as far as handheld consoles go, where you start at $400, and in reality, if you want something really good, you're getting up into the price of a laptop, maybe not a gaming laptop, but inherently, I guess a lot of people never really wanted laptops in the first place. You're very often given a laptop because your parents or your school doesn't want to have you tethered to a desk and play on a desktop, or because there's just this perception that you're going to travel and use it traveling quite a bit more than you actually do. and in the past people were given laptops and Chromebooks specifically on an assumption that you wouldn't be gaming on it or wouldn't be capable of gaming on it, where handhelds are very much the different option. Last Tech Tips did an interesting thing where they took their old ROG Ally, the first generation one I believe, and just updated it with new components internally, which gave it a bigger battery life and better cooling to some level. But yeah, seemed like a weird thing to do considering the ROG Ally original doesn't run SteamOS and would still just be running Windows. So yeah, I guess we aren't quite at the point yet where they are completely getting rid of the LCD, but I could certainly see that happening as far as refurbished versions of it, which honestly would be a very nice thing for me personally and not a nice thing for anybody else in the world, because it would say I was justified in getting a Steam Deck for a kid refurbed when I did it, which was a couple weeks ago. Although noticeably the kid has been on a summer vacation type thing, so didn't take the Steam Deck with him, instead taking his Nintendo Switch, original Nintendo Switch, so he's getting no use out of it for that week. Not that I inherently want or even expect him to play just like every single day. Although if I had one when I was a kid, I would have played every single day in summer. I also admit that I would have been overdoing it a little bit in that case. But yeah, I definitely timed that out right as best as I could, just on the anticipation of prices going up. I wasn't inherently thinking on the terms that prices going up may just push Valve to stop selling refurbs. Now I guess that there is some laws in the United States where you can't refurbish something and sell it as new. But I'm not sure that's really the case. I think it's more of a thing that you just want to label something as a refurb. That way you don't have to ever actually have to do sales. Which noticeably the Steam Deck original version or OLED version has never gone on sale either. Which is completely at odds with how the Steam store works for every other thing. Of course, you're never going to get a Steam Deck for like 69 cents or anything like you can a game, but it would be nice if there were 10% sales here and there. But I wouldn't anticipate it. I believe I didn't mention this, or this happened after Wednesdays, but the United States apparently has announced a tariff on copper, which, yeah, copper is used in everything from home wiring to electronics in high levels, so that's going to make things more expensive. It's also a tariff on Canada, which I don't know if that's going to affect video games too much, but will certainly affect something, I'm sure. Moving on to the video game news. Let's go through Video Games Chronicles news. Capcom has shared their first look at Resident Evil Survival Unit, a mobile strategy game. The game will be released for mobile later this year. Okay. So, it seems like what it's going to be is a gacha game of some sort, because you've got Leon S. Kennedy as a character here with a combat power, and then 5 stars of duplicity, I guess is what I would call it, which probably means that you need 5 levels of duplicates for Leon S. Kennedy. So like 1 extra Leon S. Kennedy, or we'll just call him Leon, duplicates into this and merges, more than likely to give him 1 star. And then you probably would need 4 in total to take 2 1-stars to merge into a 2-star. Then you probably would need 8 in total to get into a 3-star, then 16 in total to get to a 4-star, and 32 in total to get to a 5-star, assuming it actually works that way. It might work even worse. You see some symbols here that are probably the types of abilities he has, and we see a level here of experience, which will slightly increase his abilities. Seems like he has a skill, and then uniquely it seems like they have specific armor in the case of weapons this time, not actual armor that would increase your combat. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have to feed guns into guns to make them 2-star, 5-star guns and level them up with some other currency. You're looking at probably at least 2 currencies in a game like this. And then the actual gameplay looks pretty boring, which is often the case for these mobile games. And I can't help but feel like here we can see there's at least 1 premium currency being shown. But yeah, I can't help but feel like this is just Capcom being stupid and putting their attention in the totally wrong place, and just trying to make money out of their fandom in a exploitative way. Looks like there's going to be a base building upgrade aspect too, which again for Resident Evil doesn't really thematically make a lot of sense. So of those 3 screenshots, I'm not seeing a lot that impresses me. I would assume maybe this is a currency and maybe this is a currency, and I would assume this is your main gameplay mechanic, which seems like you're probably going to have to control directly. Explosive barrels here to shoot. And then I would assume that the blurred out section here are other characters that you're going to collect. Yeah. Nothing impressive about any of that, though, really. Moving on, IO has addressed Hitman's Switch 2 performance issue and says fixes are on the way. An update is coming this summer, according to IO. So, yeah. It certainly isn't a good look that any game is running poorly on the brand new Switch 2. It's also not a good look that there has been very little talk this week about the Switch 2 because there are no games out. I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, that Donkey Kong Bonanza may have actually been intended to be a Switch 1 game, which, yeah, that's believable, certainly. Definitely believable that several of the games coming out early in the launch of the Switch 2 may have originally been Switch 1 games. Paid custom servers are coming to Sea of Thieves next year. The game's season model will also get an overhaul this year. So, Sea of Thieves is still around, even though Microsoft is laying off so many other people. And apparently they're going with a way of making more money by having people pay for custom servers. Maybe there is a big enough fandom around Sea of Thieves that would be interested in that. Let's see if we can do something here. Right click and search for Sea of Thieves on Steam. And that will let me see what we are seeing. Overall, Sea of Thieves is very positive at the 89% mark. And in the last 30 days, it's much lower at 78%, but that's still mostly positive. It is an online PvP game, and online right now, there's 6,000 players, which is too low, but it is also, I guess, a 5-year-old game with a 24-hour peak of 12,000. And noticeably, I think a lot of people playing this game probably are playing this on Xbox, so its all-time peak is only 66,000. But yeah, from a PC gamer perspective, Sea of Thieves 2025 edition, as they've relabeled it, is not being heavily populated by people actually playing it on Steam. Is there anything else to talk about in this article? I don't think so. The FBI apparently has seized a major Nintendo Switch piracy site. Nintendo continues to battle Switch 1 piracy. It's interesting that the US government would be doing piracy fighting at this point, but not that interesting really. I mean, this could have been in the works for a long time. This could have been something that they could have done at any time, and they were just choosing not to. There is a story also, at least rumors I've seen, that seem to imply people are buying used games for Switch 1 and Switch 2 and getting their consoles banned because one would assume somebody bought those games originally, ripped them, uploaded them to some kind of pirating site, and then got them blacklisted as far as that specific game with that specific cartridge with that specific encrypted signature on it. Which, yeah, I'm sure Nintendo is very happy to say, hey, you can't buy used games anymore because there's a chance that they are on our banned list. But yeah, Nintendo is not winning any favors amongst gamers, certainly at the moment, by pursuing anti-piracy efforts while also not offering any games on sale or any new games to play in the first place, or anything to really distract gamers away from their anti-piracy efforts. Let's see. The websites may mean the domain, or it may mean or it may mean the actual servers. Let's see. We're getting any real details as to what the website was, though. No, Video Games Chronicles not giving us a name of the website. And this is all just according to Kotaku. So if I click on Kotaku, well, then I'm going to be taken to Kotaku's front page, apparently. And that's not somewhere I want to be, so moving on. Goes to Yoti. I'm hearing a lot of people pronounce it Yoti, Maybe it is Yeti, the way it's spelled. Ghost Yeti is getting a special PS5 covers, controllers, and bundles. The accessories will release alongside Ghost of Tsushima sequel. Its release in October. It is kind of ridiculous that we're still getting these kinds of frivolities. It just feels like it's work that does not need to be done. And with all the layoffs in the gaming industry, where are the layoffs in the publishing and the advertising and the branding departments that are just coming up with these gimmicks over and over again? Like, it's just unnecessary. Yeah, somebody, I wish, would just go to war with frivolity and say, hey, your console is going to be black, it's going to be in a box, it's going to look kind of good, but that's your only version of it. And that'll be that. Let's see, Astrobot's latest DLC finally adds a historic missing in action game series to its cameo list. The cameo comes after speculation that the series publisher blocked the inclusion of the franchise. Who would that be? Why be so coy? Ghost of Yoti themed cameo. Yeah, they're treating it like it's a spoiler. As a reward for completing one of Astrobot's latest challenge levels, High Inflation, players are rewarded with a camo bot from Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. Okay. So it was Final Fantasy. Alright. That was not worth scrolling down to find out that. Moving on. Here's the story I was talking about. Donkey Kong Bonanza began development on the original Nintendo Switch before moving to the Switch 2. I imagine that's true for a lot of games. It doesn't, I think, really change anything. The game's focus on voxel technology and destruction prompted the move to the Switch 2. Yeah. Probably more likely it prompted a delay than prompted the move to the Switch 2. It's interesting for them to describe Donkey Kong Bonanza as a focus on voxel technology, which at a certain level I guess it is voxel technology, but it certainly doesn't look like the voxels you usually see when you see a game saying that it's being built on voxels. Almost always when you see a voxel, it is a 3D cube type shape and very blocky, like Minecraft. Whereas the hair on Donkey Kong here is probably not really voxel technology. And the outer shells of rocks and things are going to be a weird type of voxel technology. Super Mario Odyssey's director is a producer on Donkey Kong Bonanza. They are really dragging out any information they can find. I guess game journalists are actually doing their job this time as far as who is actually working on Donkey Kong Bonanza. And yeah, the game is being directed by Kazuya Takahashi, who joined Nintendo in 2020, which from that timeline, you know, then he's probably not touched Donkey Kong before in any form. And for the Mario series, they are definitely trying to get newer people involved with developing Mario games. But Miyazaki, I think, will still act like he's in charge and the main creative force behind Mario until he retires or dies, whichever happens first. Let's see. GameStop is auctioning off the stapler and staple that damaged a customer's Nintendo Switch 2. The damaged Switch 2, which GameStop has repaired, is also part of the auction. Interesting. So I wonder how many times they could get away with that and auction off multiple staplers, multiple Switch 2s. It's probably a decent way to make light of a mistake, but it also probably would have just been better for GameStop to have never mentioned it again and just gone silent, because really this is GameStop just reminding you that they don't train their employees well enough, and they probably don't pay their employees well enough. And I would argue, if this is really video game news at all, more than this is just some backwards advertising, certainly doesn't make me want to go and buy something from GameStop or buy the auctioned Switch. Nintendo is ending the Nintendo Switch Game Voucher service. Customers will have 1 year to redeem their game vouchers. This is a service I think that very few people actually engaged with, and I doubt that they are going to replace it with something. It was perhaps a way to save if you knew for certain that you were going to buy 2 games in a reasonable amount of time. You would pay $100 for 2 vouchers, and then you could redeem them for games that cost $59.90, so it'd save you about $20. But in the major time, as far as what you could actually redeem, you probably would have saved more by not buying vouchers and just buying the games in physical form used, or within that time frame there probably weren't too many games available that you would have even wanted to purchase. Like, throughout the entire life of the Switch 1, I'm not sure over the 12-month period there ever were 2 games that you would have been certain you would have wanted to get. And yeah, I can't help but wonder if maybe parents these days have finally learned, because they were never happy about getting gift cards when they were kids, that they should just let kids have cash and buy things with cash, and at a certain level, that way you can have kids learn the value of a dollar and learn how to hold on to dollars by losing smaller amounts instead of just blowing it up. I can't help but also think that maybe there's some cheap parents out there that give their kids cash just so they can tell them, well, you're a penny short, so you can't buy it, when most parents would be kind enough to cover a penny or a dollar or 2 difference. But yeah, I don't think too many people are going to mourn the loss of the game voucher program, which will bring us to the Gematsu articles. Eden Zero X Fairy Tales 100 Years Quest collaboration announced. Okay. Don't know if that's really going to go anywhere, but you can see that they're announcing the collaboration before the game is even out, which maybe does mean at least they're going to try and push it a little bit. Eden Zero is another one of these animes that I think came out several years ago, so I question how relevant it is these days. Atelier Resolorina, the Red Alchemist, and the White Guardian system introduction trailer and screenshots are available on Gematsu. I don't think I want to go through all of this, though, just in an effort to save time. I definitely feel like I'm in a weird position today too, where, and this is the problem with streaming later in the evening anyways, is that I just don't know what I'm even doing this weekend. Yeah. I guess I have little plans, but I need to still schedule some. I still got plenty of things to schedule. As far as that, I probably should make some YouTube shorts. But yeah, I feel like I'm mostly going to accomplish very little until I get like that smart fan, which I have done enough testing where I can now say I've made the decision I'm going to put the smart fan in my bedroom, take the fan in my bedroom and put it in my dining room, where the dining room fan's motor is burnt out and could use replacing. That'll be the best layout for me, because my current bedroom fan has a smart fan functions, but it's not a DC motor smart fan, so it only has 3 speeds, but it will work fine, I think, in a dining room where you really won't need that fine tune of control, or at least it will work fine for a while. So I'm just going to be doing a lot of moving things around, which I'm sure interests nobody other than me. And yeah, I have a whole bunch of do-it-yourself projects I need to get back to. Now that I've finally gotten the cough off, which I think I'm over the cough now. I haven't coughed at all today, other than what I would say is a normal level of coughing for me, which is still probably too much, but not that bad. Now, I bought that whole new mattress, and I will say I'm still not really particularly comfortable on my new mattress either. It's still poking me in the ribs quite a bit, but that might be part of the cough too, still healing up. But yeah, I'm starting to feel a little bit more energetic, and just going to get back to trying to finish do-it-yourself stuff, which do-it-yourself projects and cleaning and decluttering and just a lot of physical work I need to start focusing back on. Maybe it's getting a little bit cooler too, so that's gonna bother me less. Anyways, we're supposed to be talking about Gamatsu articles, and I'm rambling. Trails in the Sky, first chapter, character trailer, Chloe Rince is available here if you want to look into her. I am still watching some anime series, but honestly, I'm not sure I remember what anime series I'm watching on streaming, which is really a bad statement for it, that I've completely blanked on what I'm watching. No, yeah, I'm watching ReZero, yeah, and the story just kind of wrapped up at one point, and then I didn't jump back into it, so yeah. But yeah, for a moment there, I'd completely forgotten the entirety of watching several episodes, 5-6 episodes of ReZero, which is, yeah, not a good statement, not a good situation to be in. Moving on, HoloLive Gorogoro Mountain launches July 24th. Definitely feels like at this point HoloLive is just becoming this brand label that is going to be putting out kind of silly games around that. And there's a demo available also. Atelier Ryza Secret Trilogy Deluxe Pack announced for the PS5, Switch 2, PS4, Switch, and PC, which does mean there's room to save some money instead of just buying the individual Atelier Ryza games. The question is, what else do you get? It seems like exclusive content such as new playable characters and new story elements for all 3 titles. Okay. Yeah. Here's a great example where you probably had slightly different animators, so you have slightly different tones of hair colors on the character as she ages a little bit and grows a little bit. And while that would be totally normal in the real world, it just does not work well in fiction for characters to change too much. You can kind of change your outfit, that's fine, but even that you have to kind of stay consistent in what elements exist. Otherwise, you will lose a certain audience. And in video games, you can easily just have the characters look exactly the same. It is also weird, though, to point out that there's a whole team behind the main protagonist, and none of those characters are ever made prominent in any of the cover art. The zoom in there didn't really help that much, did it? It's too pixely. Let's see, moving on. Inti Creates announces a 2D action platformer called Mojogami for Switch 2, Switch, and PC. Which, it might be what we start hearing a lot more about, is games that are for the Switch 2, Switch, and PC. Yeah. That may very well be the trend, and if that stays the trend and grows as a trend, then that is probably the death of at least Xbox and possibly Sony PlayStation 2. Taito announces a rhythmic puzzle game called QQQ Beats for Switch. Seems like we are just now getting to the point where the third-party developers are even making announcements towards Switch 2 games or Switch games in general. This may very well be a game that plays on the Switch 1, because I don't think there's going to be anything here that really would force you to play this on a Switch 2. And seems to be a mix between Bubble Bobble and rhythm elements. Let's see. Here's the Magica. Oh, let's see. It says Modica, Magica, Magi, etc. in the logo, but the headline here calls it Puella, Magi, Modica, Magica, Magi, etc. And it's launching for PC on July 17th, which honestly don't think that is going to make it much better of an experience, really. And if you try to stream it, you're going to have it in streaming mode, and you're going to miss out on a lot of the audio and the music. And the English voice translation, if you're playing it in English, is going to be lackluster, to say the least. It's worth pointing out, when I first started playing this game a few months ago, this is the main character, this is the secondary main character, and then I have had no idea who that character is and still don't. This is a secondary character that's in the first 2 anime movies. This is a secondary character that's in the first 2 anime movies. And then I have no idea who this character is. And this is a secondary character. And then I think there's another one over here that I haven't even seen in the game yet. And have no idea who it is. And another character here. And another character here that I have no idea. So 2 more characters. So there's just like a lot of characters to make it a gacha game. Another character here I even missed. um, to make it a gacha game, and it's still not really a good gacha game. Considering the anime series being so focused on these two main protagonists, it really makes no sense for there to be so many other characters at all. I can't help but assume, in my tinfoil hat theory, that they are rushing this PC to make as much sales as possible, because eventually they're just going to give up on it and stop adding content to it. And there might be a long period there where they are adding nothing to it, but it still runs, and then maybe after a year or two they just shut it down. Again, they're already up to season 8, which also creates a problem. If you jump into the PC version, you're not going back to season 1, so that's going to be a weird thing. And you play as this shadow of a character who is supposed to have their own single player story, but I've long since forgotten about that character, or caring about that character at all, that you're playing as. It is very much just not a game worth playing over watching the anime. You should just watch the anime and enjoy the good content there. Yeah. Perhaps their argument here, switch to mobile for short gaming sessions, is undercut by the fact that once you get into the late game, fights themselves often go like 10-20 minutes. Yeah. I feel like the artist here that really wants to show off things. And by the way, this world running around is basically automated and pointless. They're interestingly not showing any of the actual battle screens. That's the battle scene, and that's what you spend 99% of your time on when you're not in the menu, which is where you spend really probably 70% of your time. So of the remaining 30% of the time, you're spending 99% of that 30% in battle. But yeah, maybe they do have some connection to the animators, and they're really just trying to show off the art, and the big screen certainly can do that at least, but I am not particularly thinking that there's going to be a whole bunch of people on day one playing this on Steam. But I could be wrong. Well, you probably should know that anime fans can sometimes be rabid, but probably not on this. I mean, this is like a 10-year-old plus anime series too, so and only things like Dragon Ball Z managed to get people's attention that many years later. I don't know why there was 4 copies of this open at the same time. Moving on, Type Noise Shonen Shoujo series launches September 17th. I vaguely think I've heard of Type Noise. I don't know if it's based off of an actual anime though, or if I've just heard of this game because I saw it before. Yeah, I think I just heard it from this game. I don't recognize this from any other form of medium. Ghost of Yotai State of Play Gameplay Deep Dive. PlayStation 5 Limited Edition consoles announced. Is there an actual video here if you wanted to see this State of Play Gameplay Deep Dive? Yes, there is. Check that out on Gamatsu if you want to look at it. A game called Heartworm launches July 31st. It's a retro-inspired survival horror game. Always question these types of games that have these kinds of visuals and then effectively are selling themselves as being a good thing because they have this low polygon visuals. Honestly, I question if it isn't just a lack of skill or a lack of care, because it definitely feels like if you had this state of animation for your character, that would be a lot better. Let's see. Borderlands 4 has Vex gameplay overview and character short, which makes me think you're probably going to get gameplay overview and character shorts for all the 4 initial what are they called? Vault Hunters? Yeah, I guess they're still probably called Vault Hunters. In the game, characters, protagonist characters. Yeah. Borderlands comes out September 12th, and so they are definitely trying to lay down the ground and probably doing a much better job of promoting and advertising this game compared to Borderlands 3. The question certainly is just going to be, is there a fandom there for Borderlands 4 that will play Borderlands 4 and actually want to play it on day one? Or has that fandom moved on, which is very believable. Flamekeeper is coming to the PS5 on July 25th. It's currently available for the Switch and PC. I remember this game. I'm not sure it's ever made it anywhere. Noticeably, yeah. It didn't make it anywhere. It's 68% positive with 61 user reviews, so both fairly irrelevant and not well received. Hotel Barcelona launches in September, playable at the Bit Summit the 13th. Which I just now got the joke there to call it the 13th instead of Bit Summit number 13. It's supposed to be like Friday the 13th parody. Which, yeah. Hotel Barcelona is a weird one from the creators of Deadly Premonition and No More Heroes, which, frankly, I genuinely don't think two weird producers coming together to collaborate makes a good product. I think one weirdo with a vision works very often, but once you have two weirdos with different visions, they tend to conflict and not contribute to each other. Don't know why we have Copa City here open. Copa City, I guess, is launching March 26th, 2026. There it is again. Wild Hearts S demo is now available. Play through the first stages of the game. So is that weirder demo that we saw a teaser trailer for. Alright, we have the Famitsu sales from the 30th to the 6th updated, with Mario Kart World remaining on top. So yeah, this would still be very much in the launch window of the Switch 2. So we expect to see Switch 2 sales for some things, and then Nintendo Switch 1 game sales to be high. Death Stranding on the Beach taking the 3rd spot for the PS5. And then, let's see, when is the next PS5 game? Elden Ring Night Rain in the 19th spot. And then, do we have anything else? Yeah, Rydo Remastered The Mystery of the Soulless Army in the 28th spot. 3 PlayStation games, or non-Nintendo games, in the top 30. Pathetic low numbers there. And the hardware echoes that, certainly, in that PlayStation 5 original version barely sold 5,000 units. PS5 Pro is selling less than half of that. PS5 Digital Edition is selling less than half of that. Xbox is still selling pathetically low. But the Series S here is catching up with the PS5 Digital Edition in Japan, which is certainly, I imagine, something Sony doesn't want to see. I really can't have to question if Sony Interactive Entertainment either completely gives up the ghost as far as PlayStation, which is what I think they probably would want to do, or hands it back over to some Westerner company, subsidiary, and tells them to be in charge of it, and then blames them for its failure in Japan. Which even now you could certainly blame the lack of interest around the PlayStation on Sony Interactive Entertainment being run by American people for so long. The physical design of the PS5 alone just does not fit on the shelves of Japanese people's houses. So, no surprise that they wouldn't buy it. Of course, Sony could also double down. It would actually be more well within the long history of Sony for them to come out with a new handheld device and just say, hey, we're going in that direction, in the proud tradition of the PlayStation Vita, and instead of doing the PlayStation Portal nonsense that they've done. I don't think anybody would be upset at this point if they came out with an actual handheld instead of just a streaming device. Speaking of handhelds, I also want to warn people, don't get a non-branded, which pretty much means a non-Samsung tablet for Android. And maybe you just get an iPad anyways. But yeah, I got a terrible performing tablet, and I thought it wouldn't be a problem because I'm doing very little with it, but I mean it is a problem though. It reboots, and that might really be the program I'm using, but the fact that it's rebooting at all is crazy. It does not perform well. I often have to reboot it several times. It claims to have 6 gigabytes of RAM, but it's either really slow 6 gigabytes of RAM or it's lying about that. Which 6 gigabytes of RAM on Android should be enough, but more the better. And it says it has a 2 gigahertz octa-core processor, but I don't think it has a good GPU in it at all with that processor, and definitely doesn't feel like it's a strong arm style processor. And yeah, you have to be careful. Even Samsung phones have some cheap versions that just run like garbage, and that very well may be half of people's experience too, is that they're buying the cheapest instead of the top of the line overpriced Android phones, and thus they're getting a unsatisfactory experience overall as far as performance goes. But yeah, don't buy a no-name tablet because you will regret it, even if you don't think you will. Which I knew I might regret it, but I figured I'd gamble, try and save a few bucks. Although I'm not sure if it was worth what I saved. Moving on, and Roger adds a Switch version and launches July 24th. The game is just called And Roger, starting with and. Interesting title. Let's see. Norai Kago, the grudged domain, is coming to the Switch on August 28th. I assume that's Norai. Let's see. Do we have a Steam link to this? I don't think so. I don't think it is on Steam. Toei Animation. So this looks like it is a horror game. Frankly, it looks just like a Japanese version of something like Amnesia. Being chased by ghosts. Maybe a multiplayer game. Weirdly weird if it was a multiplayer game. Yeah, they don't have a Steam link for it. Weird that it would be a multiplayer game on Switch though. Just can't imagine that that's gonna perform well. We have a Hatsune Miku Logic Paint S Plus, which I guess I'll make a YouTube short on that. It launches July 24th for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Switch and PC. Which you'd think there would be a way to shorten that group of consoles, but at this point I'm not sure there is. It's weird, I have a bunch of half-loaded tabs that are opening up and duplicating. And Old School Rally launches this holiday for PS4 and 5, Switch, and PC. Yeah, let me take a drink of water here. I know nobody wants to hear that, but they may have to live with it. Currently, it's in early access on PC. And maybe I don't sound as bad as I sound to myself. As I am playing Red Alert, Command & Conquer Red Alert, and we move on to the Gaming on Linux articles, it still definitely feels like a reboot of the series would make a lot more sense. Yeah, there's enough story there, certainly, that you could have rebooted this series, told the two alternate timelines of the Tiberian timeline and the Red Alert timeline, and just made a much better game. It feels like every version of Command & Conquer is incrementally improving on the gameplay mechanics and the balance there, so you could very easily make a reboot of that series and maybe make it seasonal and more of a live service experience if you have to make it a live service experience, so that you're just constantly tweaking and changing the experience as far as making the game balanced or introducing new characters and mechanics. Anyways, moving on to Gaming on Linux articles. You can build your own Capcom Summer Bundle with Fanatical, which, yeah, there might be a good offering here, specifically because of it being Capcom. A lot of these games tend not to go on sale, but I am certainly over budget at this point, probably until at least Black Friday and Christmas, as far as buying any games for myself. I have plenty of games to play, and yeah, potentially I'm gonna die of old age before I play most of them. Which, yeah, I'm starting to wonder as far as I'm gonna have to set up a backup password book or something of just all my passwords and accounts and everything, just for whoever is going to take over my empire, my digital empire of games on Steam and otherwise, and this YouTube channel to some level. Moving on, trying to have a shotgun for an arm in the demo of Captain Wayne Vacation Desperation. Interesting. I think we've got a Steam link here. I feel like I had already shown this one and made a short on this one, but apparently not. Super Weird is a co-op mixture of automation, tower defense, and adventuring. Is that super weird? Yes, not wired. Craftomation 101 programming craft is being referenced, I think, in that article. Which I guess I'll put this on the follow list, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short on something that came out a while ago. Learning Factory, I think, is another game being mentioned in that article. All true. So like 3 different games are being mentioned before we get to Super Weird. Let's see. Lossless scaling frame generation for Linux gets upgraded to the latest version 3.1. This program seems to have gotten a lot of coverage lately from people still making footage on YouTube talking about the Steam Deck, when it's probably past the point where you can just continuously talk about the Steam Deck. And yeah, I've seen people use it, and it does seem like it maybe helps a little. I still question, though, if it's worth the extra effort to get slight improvements. And it may very well be down to improvements of desktop applications and less improvements when you're launching a Steam game from gaming mode on SteamOS. So, yeah. It definitely seems like this is a great way to... I guess I'll just put it on my wish list. It's a great way to just drive yourself crazy, though. Fiddling with this instead of just playing games and being happy with what you've got. Let's see, a Craft and Thrive adventure called Squirreled Away tweaks the graphics for Steam Deck players. So I guess that's a good thing. One would assume that that's a good thing. That they're trying to make things better. You can rotate and unfold the world in a wonderful 3D platformer called Paper Clay, which is now Steam Deck verified. Interesting. Looks like that might be something. The stress testing app OCCT switches to Vulkan by default, dropping DirectX. So that would be, I think, just closer to bare metal processing and testing. Yeah. Seems like more than likely they're probably doing it because it's easier. But it might very well also be a closer depiction of what running a Linux app on a Linux device, is, more than a approximation of what performance would be running a Windows DirectX application through something like Wine on Linux. Yep. And this is free, so it's already in my library, although I've never really played with it. Don't think I would. Unrailed has gotten fixed for Steam Deck and an update for controllers on Linux and Mac OS. So yeah, it does definitely seem like there are people out there that still are trying to get their games to run on SteamOS and are enthusiastic about it. The programmers are enthusiastic about it to a certain level. Let's see. Multiple games from Slytherin are free to keep for a limited time, like Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. Black Desert Online is also free at the moment, but I mean, that is also an MMO, so it's not going to be 100% free for a long time. So yeah, we have Fantasy General 2, which yeah, I saw slick deals for that. The question though is, are you really getting everything you want here, or would you come back and have to buy DLC at some point if you actually like this game? Field of Glory Medieval is apparently free, but again, the complete edition here is actually $40. So how free, really? It's really just that they're giving away the base games. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, again free, so we might as well get it. Build up that library. But, yeah. I liked the plan from the new Battlestar Galactica series, that movie, and I think overall the new Battlestar Galactica in an abridged format, in a kind of more polished format, works. But there is a question certainly as to whether you really want to sit through the last season of Battlestar Galactica, or even the first season, which I think was kind of good, but it definitely is just not going to end well. Here we have yet another game free, so might as well grab it. Yeah. I feel like even the plan needed to lead into like a trilogy of Battlestar Galactica movies, to just do, hey, here's the setup and start of the series, here's the middle of the series, and here's the end of the series, being recapped and retold. Same thing is kind of true for like Stargate, like, and yeah, if they ever do make another Stargate movie, taking all of the spin-off Stargate TV shows and everything that happened in a TV show and just rewriting that into a series of movies would be much more approachable for people late to the party. Moving on, the real-time strategy Rush Humble Bundle has some strategy games not to be missed. I am obviously playing Command & Conquer Red Alert, so in that I am considering what is the state of real-time strategy at the moment, and does it in any way resemble something like Command & Conquer, which I think a lot of it kind of doesn't. On some levels, I'm not sure people care about what would be post-medieval, but still somewhat historical World War I, World War II simulators or themes. So yeah, there's a Men of War Assault Squad 2, which seems like it might be a real-time strategy game worth thinking about. From 2014. Though there is a real question as to how many real-time strategy games do I really want to play. I more than likely would burn myself out just with the Command & Conquer series, and will burn myself out with the Command & Conquer series, and then hopefully at some point I could play something like StarCraft for a more sci-fi fantasy type game, but that would be about it. Yeah. does feel like in these Commandos games it is a bit more zoomed in, less just top-down control of large amounts of units. There's a lot of these Commandos games. Why can I not put this on the follow list? Yeah, weird glitch there. AI War. I think I probably don't want to play this. Just because space games in particular, and 4X space games probably are very close to real-time strategy games, and they've always just irritated me quite a bit. More than they really should have. Yeah, I could see a medieval fantasy real-time strategy game. But it is also very possible that these kinds of games are just not prominent enough. And so there is a real argument to stick to the big ones. Command and Conquer, StarCraft, Tooth and Tell I guess I already own, so I should play Tooth and Tell and just say, hey, here's something from 2017 to contrast Command and Conquer as a series, and almost certainly would contrast Command and Conquer as a series. But yeah, effectively I have to put all of these games on the follow list just to question that entire genre as far as how many of them I really would want to own. A first-person horror platformer, Blessed Burden, adds Linux and Steam Deck support. Interesting. I sometimes say interesting subconsciously when I really mean okay or not interested. I haven't seen this game, I don't think. You can raid an abandoned Soviet R&D institute in a single-player extraction shooter called Red Light. Yeah, almost said interesting again. And this actually looks pretty bad, but I'll give it a chance. You can plant, grow, and harvest in the farming roguelite deck builder crop deck. Sign up to playtest. Roguelite and deck builder seems like a lot. I kind of think it might be somewhat inspired by Beleotro, but it might also just be all over the place as far as gameplay styles and weirdness. Oblivion Remastered version 1.2 gets a beta with lots of fixes and optimizations, which definitely implies that, like most Bethesda games, you should probably wait 3 or 4 years before actually playing it to get a smooth and nice experience there. As nice as you're going to get, at least. And then we can look at Oblivion here, and in the last 30 days it is 60% positive. Overall, it's 79% positive, and it's down to 5,910 at its 24-hour peak, which is much lower than its all-time peak of 216,000, and this came out just in April of this year. So yeah, people jumped in, people had nostalgia, and then when they really started to play it, they probably realized it wasn't worth playing. Very buggy and broken, says this review. Crashes all from time to time. Doesn't run well on a Steam Deck. And that is certainly something handheld devices like the Steam Deck that can play PC games are going to recontextualize to, is that remasters are now going to be held to a performance standard as well as potentially a visual upgrade standards, whereas this game almost certainly was trying for visual upgrades first and foremost, and performance was a afterthought. Let's see, you can try the big demo update for Dicey Bugs, a turn-based deck builder where you control both sides. Interesting. So, different from the animal game. Well, if you control both sides, what are you trying to do? You trying to let one side win, or are you trying to make a tie? Super Pals, I believe, is the game that this looks like. Yeah. And Super Pals as a game was interesting for a couple days, and then it kind of ran out of steam for me. Just not enough variety there, and then not enough strategy and control. A chilled dino ranching game called Paleo Pines is crowdfunding for a big free update. Interesting. Interesting that you would crowdfund a game that is already out to try and make a big update for free. But I guess that is one way to go. You can see overall this game is 85% positive, but in the last 30 days it's 55% positive, so it's fallen mightily. Very few people are actually playing it, so I can't help but wonder if game could have been amazing, but it felt so unfinished while I was playing. Everything in the game just felt so flat and repetitive and almost no reward, the biggest reward being the dinos. The only 100% out of it out of spite, so I'll never have to play it again. Somewhat disappointing game. Game is horrible. Yeah. So it feels like what it probably was a game that was half developed, or a game that they planned on selling to 5-year-olds and ended up getting an audience of probably older than 5-year-olds, let's call them 20-year-olds, who would be a much more demanding audience. Yeah. I guess in this case I'm going to take this off the wish list and put it down to the follow list, which I don't get an opportunity to do that very often. That brings us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, and it does seem once again that there's just less news today, so with any luck we might be done in less than 3 hours. Still haven't figured out how to close patch notes from GameDeveloper.com, which are just a collection of stories. Yeah, they're claiming that funding cuts have devastated the video game research and development. I don't know what the US government was funding as far as video game research and development in the first place, as far as the federal government, though. People laid off from Microsoft stand to lose on invested shares worth a pretty penny. There probably should be a law against that, being laid off and then your shares not vesting immediately in that case. Yeah, but I've seen a lot of stories of that where people are just about the time to get a bonus, just about time to get some kind of vested shares, and it's definitely an example where there should be more union support. It's the only way we really know of to give any kind of leverage to the employee over the employer, and the union would at least fight to drag out layoffs until more shares vest. Apparently, in response to Microsoft layoffs, EA Japan exec says foreign businesses demand short-term results from investments that require more time. Which, yeah, that is easier to agree with, certainly. Let's see. Nintendo discontinuing the Switch vouchers, we already talked about. So we'll leave it at that. Co-dev specialist side partners with Savvy Games Group is going to open a Riyadh studio. Savvy is wholly owned by the Saudi Arabia state-backed public investment fund, which is chaired by Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So this is perhaps the first story that I recall of them actually opening a studio in the Middle East instead of them just investing in video game companies globally. I wonder how much the prince just really loves video games or actually just sees this as a good industry to invest in. It isn't the worst idea to try to make Saudi Arabia a environment that isn't just inherently reliant on oil sales. As far as here's the place where you could have a lot of educated workers work. But yeah, Saudi Arabia still has a lot of problems that come on the back end of that. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if you saw the likes of Microsoft just building offices in Saudi Arabia also, and then having more and more games be developed by Saudi Arabian people just to save a buck or two, or not have unions, or not have workers' rights, or anything like that. Yeah. But them starting a studio is not immediately cause for concern in any way. If anything, it might be a hint that the Public Investment Fund is going to stop investing globally and instead invest locally, which might make a lot more people happy, at least less concerned. Here's a story I talked about at the very beginning of the stream. There's a report that Crafton allegedly delayed Subnautica 2 to avoid paying devs a $250 million bonus. The reported $250 million figure was tied to revenue targets around the original 2025 release date. Which, yeah, we had pretty much talked about this story, and it is a complicated story that is happening at the moment, so I wouldn't be surprised if even by Monday there's a new twist to the whole story, so I'm not going to rehash it now. Yeah. Now I know the Strong Museum of Play, which I really should probably contact them and donate my Nintendo collection to them, either them or someone else, lost funding. By limiting research in this industry, it's limiting science as a whole. So the University of North Carolina was awarded $150,000 in August 2024 to research ways in which libraries could collect, preserve, and provide access to digital video games. Okay. Via the National Leadership Grant from the Institute for Museum and Library Services, IMLS. But in April of 2025, while research was actively ongoing, the funding was suddenly rescinded as a result of the sweeping cuts to the science, arts, humanities, and museum funding. Okay, so that's the details we wanted to know, and now we know. And I don't know if there's anything else I really have to say about that, but museums are getting underfunded, which inherently is also a problem for me as far as if I want to donate my Nintendo collection to a museum, I want to have some confidence that the museums themselves aren't going to run out of business and go out of business, which the National Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas, yeah, I haven't heard anything about them lately. They don't really seem like they update their displays and what they have to show very often, and so without that level of refreshing, I question how well a museum is going to do in the long term. Is it like at least once a year you kind of need to refresh things, and very often like around Christmas or Halloween having special themed events would make sense, and I really just don't see them doing any of that. Although they may be doing perfectly fine and they may just get enough foot traffic on a day-to-day basis that it just doesn't matter that they aren't changing anything. Oh, but if we're going to talk about museum-like places that isn't really a museum, the Universal Studios, Universal Dimensions, I think is what it's called, has opened up, and that included a Nintendo World dimension, as well as 4 other dimensions based around Universal Studios. I know another one was Universal Monsters, so like the Bride of Frankenstein and things like that. The Invisible Man was a different dimension. So I wouldn't recommend going to Universal Dimensions within the first year or so of it. It's going to be packed, it's going to be probably expensive, and the rides are probably at their peak point of having something catastrophe wise happen to them. So I'd give it a year or two. I also wouldn't recommend coming back like 10 years later when everything might be stale and the rides are starting to break down, but yeah. Nintendo World on United States soil does seem to have happened, and we'll probably see a bunch of stories of people going there and covering it on Monday or the next week or so. Bunch of content creators certainly would want to go and check it out. Although I would say that the Nintendo World probably is also targeting a younger audience, and it probably is going to be really expensive also. Yeah. Let's see. The UK Minister forms UK Video Games Council to drive pro games growth agenda. We want to make UK the best place globally to invest in creativity and innovation, which in fairness the UK has very little that they can export, so growth in creativity and innovation very well could be the way forward for the UK. That is the question that was really, can they make a bunch of creative games or not, particularly even if they are getting government funding. I can't help but wonder if maybe this is a reaction to Stop Killing Games, and that this council may be a wolf in sheep's clothing that is going to shout down the idea of the Stop Killing Games movement in favor of saying we're going to give grants and funding to video game companies so that they bring their business to the UK so the UK gets tax dollars from it. Yeah. They could very easily turn from a council to a lobbying group for the industry, and not really, even here, they're not really promoting the idea of making video games better for gamers. There is a history, certainly, of UK game developers out there, but more recently, there's been only a few that are still in business and still making games. Most of the UK games that would have been made would have been more text-based adventure type things from the 70s and 80s. Alright, and that's going to bring us to all new games on Steam, which I could use a small bathroom break. And so I think I will go ahead and take that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, I never really claim these daily things, or I very rarely do, as far as all that goes. Not that it matters, because I'm not really playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I did see an interesting Slick Deals earlier today. There is apparently a sensitive formula for Prego pasta sauce, which does not include onions or basil. Which, it's interesting that it's labeled as sensitive instead of just calling it tomato sauce at that point, instead of calling it marinara or pasta sauce. But yeah, it seems like it is actively designed for people who would actually be allergic to those things, instead of just people who dislike those things. Although you can buy it if you dislike those things, you're probably gonna end up paying more for it than it's worth. And if you really just dislike those things, get pizza sauce or tomato sauce, and you'll likely then have no onions or basil in it anyways. Which, yeah, there's a whole variety there of how much do you really want in your tomato sauce, how much other more traditional herbs and spices do you want, and frankly, how much sugar do you want added to a tomato sauce. Ketchup in particular is a sneaky way in which food gets sugar added to it. Oh, and I guess speaking of sugar, I did see something on Facebook, so it might be totally fake, that someone in China, a research group in China, have claimed to be able to use the CRISPR process to use stem cells to cure type 2 diabetes, where the research to cure type 1 diabetes has been evolving for years now, and is probably not too far away from becoming approved in some countries, maybe never approved in the United States, because the drug companies want to just sell insulin at a marked up price. But type 2 diabetes is the one that most adults get, where type 1 is what kids get when they're born. And there's definitely more of a blaming the type 2 diabetes patients for eating too much sugar, which very often it is the case that people who have type 2 diabetes did eat too much sugar and still eat too much sugar even after being diagnosed. But yeah, if there was a actual cure, not just a treatment, that could save a lot of people a lot of money, even people that don't have diabetes, because a significant portion of the US's healthcare system's funding and money goes towards insulin and other treatments for type 2 diabetes. Anyways, though, that has nothing to do with video games, so let's look at all the new games on Steam. Yeah. So I am just kind of warming up here after taking a insignificantly small break. I guess we are probably in a situation where there's no reason to expect too much happening as far as new games for a while. Prime Day is a made-up holiday, effectively, but it does, I think, perhaps represent the beginning of the end of summer as far as sales maybe go. So I think I'm being too generous. A badminton game. Well, it's surprising there aren't more of those. This looks like this is just a text-based game. They're calling it a visual novel. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't going to be much more of a reason that you would want to sell a game in the back half of summer. And you know, when kids get back into school, parents tend to go back to work. Also, it just tends to mean less free time overall. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get the occasional thing here and there, but Donkey Kong Bonanza is about the biggest thing I expect. And then after Donkey Kong Bonanza, I don't know what I would be expecting at all. Big Fish Games still putting out their hidden object game series here and there. You know, I'm doing a bad job of checking to see if these things are already tagged and checked too. I'm not really paying attention to that. But yeah, the way things have worked out as far as my new system, there's really just no reason for my eyes to go down there and see if the checkbox is checked. Dog walk is an interesting idea. A game where you're just simulating walking a dog. Is this the same game twice? Seems like it. Still spending way too much time on YouTube. Particularly way too much time doing cracking the crypto. But yeah. Every now and then I get good enough to actually succeed on one of those extremely high level Sudoku variant puzzles, but I think percentage wise I might be getting worse as far as running into ones that I can't figure out. But I may very well be getting better overall as far as time management, in that I make a mistake early, potentially realize I make a mistake, and then lose interest in trying to actually solve the puzzle myself and just watch the video on 2-speed and hope I actually assimilate some of their concepts. But it is very often the break-in part that is the difficult part. I'm gonna say no to this. And I'm definitely gonna say no to cats. Let's see. Let me check this one. Beth Jesus' Simulator. So it's a Jeff Bezos game, it says, but it looks like what you're really doing is just packaging packages and shipping it out. And for some reason is tagged with sexual content when I don't think it really has any of that. Yeah, I just question, is there perhaps a cabal out there that are flagging games with tags that sees these games incredibly fast? What would be really crazy is if it was somebody inside of Valve just automatically adding like sexual content as a tag to many games to then force people to flag it as being wrong. I don't know how many people really are flagging tags though. I think almost none. Because it's not really a system that benefits you too much. Yeah. Inherently, it would be much nicer if these games could be automatically tagged by some kind of algorithm, but that would never be accurate. Yeah. Organization in the digital world is still very much an issue. It's never going to be resolved. It's just files are not labeled correctly. There is no standard, or there's too many standards to label things correctly. Music being tagged, video games being tagged, pictures being tagged, pictures perhaps on the verge of being able to be automatically tagged. And yeah, music and sound effects you could tag by a beats per minute automatically, which for the use of video games might be good enough. Yeah. What really irritates me is the monopolies around karaoke in the West. It's just like impossible to get karaoke files without paying through the nose, and many songs don't even have karaoke edits, because karaoke edits have to be not just a instrumental version of a song, it has to potentially have the backing singers or the backup singers, and so a karaoke version then becomes a different thing. But yeah, most songs don't even have instrumental versions. And again, you can't just automate the removal of the songs, the singers. You could try, but it'll only get you so far. Plus, you have to have the words on a karaoke video. And that's not even getting into something complicated like having the files pause if you stop singing. Right, this game called Dragon Conqueror, I think intentionally should be in the adult section because it is 2D anime girls all with very big boobs and big butts, so it's being tagged as sexual content I think is accurate. But also, I would imagine it's one of these games that doesn't actually show you anything until you install a uncensored patch to it. But yes, censored gaming is still AWOL and probably never coming back. So there's been less talk of censorship from any news sources that I follow, but I do believe there's probably been some incidences, just don't remember him. This one doesn't support English, and a simplistic name like Cute Warrior Girl makes me suspect it's not very long. 10 to 15 minutes Korean game. Yeah. We might see an eventual growth in Korean game developers trying their hand at PC gaming instead of making mobile games, and trying on a very simplistic level with just cheap, low effort games. Which, yes, that worldwide is going to be an issue as you see more mobile gamers, mobile game devs try to come to PC and not really adapt to the PC audience or know how to make a quality enough game. I'm leaving, I think, way too many games open at the moment to make YouTube Shorts on. And I believe today is probably a day where we have actually a decent amount of new games on Steam anyways. This would be the time, I guess, to release a game that I guess Tony Hawk Pro Skater is out. You can see it's mostly positive so far. I'll give that a little bit more time. Although, what am I waiting for? It makes all the requirements. Just put it on the wish list. But yeah, if the Steam Summer Sale is over, you probably would want to wait just a short amount of time and then in out. It's not reviewed well, which is a shame because it looks interesting to me. Seems like not that many people are playing it. Might be a big problem. Yeah. Yeah. They're saying it's like another game but worse. We assume the winter sale is the next big sale. Fall sale, maybe. But between now and the Steam Fall sale, I wouldn't be surprised if there's barely a dozen new AAA games that even come out. And yeah, that's to say less than a dozen would even be good and worth considering buying. And yes, there will be a ton of non-AAA games that come out, most of which are going to be irrelevant, but might be 20 to 30 games worth considering between now and the fall sale. This is obviously supposed to be like a GTA clone, but it's really just an asset flip garbage game. It's kind of spelling game of some sort. Yeah. There's a lot of games today. A lot of games. I've really hit a point though where I just don't know what would really catch my attention. I'm gonna say no to this one. Yeah. It'd have to be some more than likely a puzzle game that was just completely amazing. That was the guess. Or, yeah, there could be some other kind of game that might be really amazing that would catch my attention. But I would think that if it was going to be something really interesting, it would have to also be something that was promoted and advertised quite a bit. Yeah. I'm frankly more likely to find something like Rogue Legacy 2 on sale and want to play that than I am to get, say, something like Rogue Legacy 3 announced, which still I would need to play Rogue Legacy 2 in that example, so that was a bad comparison. Yeah. I probably should have compared Rogue Legacy 2, which is already out, and I'm just kind of waiting for it to be on sale, although it may still be in early access to like a Binding of Isaac 2, which that would be crazy if they ever made a Binding of Isaac 2. And honestly, I don't know if I want a Binding of Isaac 2 as much as I would want something like Binding of Isaac with a different group of characters and storylines and visual theme. Which would probably never happen. And there definitely are some games, particularly Nintendo games, that I would like to see spiritual clones / successors of show up on Steam. So yeah, if you could make an Ocarina of Time on Steam, spiritual successor to that, as far as a elf running around doing a fantasy thing in a Nintendo-like fashion, that would probably catch my attention. If you could make Mario games like Mario 64 in that fashion, that would catch my attention. If you could make a Punch-Out game that was good, that would certainly catch my attention. And by you, I mean if anybody could do that. I definitely feel like I need to go back through this whole list and close a bunch of tabs for things that I already had on the follow list. But honestly, it's probably not worth doing that. Just make 2 YouTube shorts. It would probably be helpful if YouTube highlighted when you had like the same title. There was just some way to say, we're gonna tell you, hey, you've got the exact same title on 2 different videos, so that seems out of place. Maybe you should retitle something, or you should consider if these 2 videos are not very similar. Although that is probably something that would probably only affect me. Nobody else on Steam, or very few people on Steam. I guess that is an interesting thought. If the general complaint is that you shouldn't be able to monetize if you're just following a format or formula, at some point you could expand that definition. I'm sure YouTube would never do this, but you could definitely expand that to Good Mythical Morning, where they are doing the same gimmick over and over again, in that they are just kind of doing random things, or variations on random things. They definitely aren't particularly creative, and to be as creative as Good Mythical Morning is, they have to have way too many people on staff and had to create entire secondary websites and YouTube channels. I definitely feel like Good Mythical Morning is one of those websites, the YouTube channels that, while I enjoy it every now and then, is also one of those channels that got in early and got lucky and is now acting very much like a power vacuum as far as opportunity goes, where they're just sucking away the opportunity for other content creators to do similar things or to even compete with them. I guess at a certain point they're probably going to retire though, so then probably not going to be a big problem forever. And we'll look at the follows cleanup here, and then we'll be done. And again, only 2.5 hours for the stream, so yeah, things are going particularly well. Does any of this follow list catch my attention? Not really.